G'day, I'm Scott Poynton and welcome to another podcast. And today I'm talking to Natasha Mahendran and she's calling all the way from Kuala Lumpur. Good morning or good evening or good afternoon, I think it is for you, Natasha, right?
Good afternoon. Nice to speak with you.
Yeah, how are you? How are you going today?
Yeah, good day. Working from home, but all is well. How are
Well,
you?
yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Also working from home in these strange times. Cases are going crazy here in Switzerland, but people don't seem to be doing too much about it. A lot of mask wearing, which is good, but yeah, cases going up. But tell us about yourself. Tell us. We're going to get into your fascinating work experience shortly, but tell me, who is Natasha Mahendran? This is your
So,
life.
so I'm an Australian, currently living in Malaysia. I have been here for about 5 years now. My background is in human rights and international development work. I've been in this field for about 10 years now, and very passionate about it. And I've been working on sustainability issues and working with companies in supply chains for the last 4 years with the Earthworm Foundation, also known as the Forest Trust previously.
Previously, the Forest Trust, yeah. And so tell us a bit about that, Natasha. What did when you say you're working in the supply chains? What does that mean? What things are you working on there?
So here in Malaysia, we mainly work in the palm oil industry. So the way we work is we're a member-based organization. So we have company members that we work with, and we help our members engage further down their palm oil supply chains.
Who are
So
those? Who are some of those members, Natasha, for our listeners? I know, of course, but just to share with the listeners, who are some of the companies that you work with?
So we have some large brand members like Nestle, Mars, Hershey's, Ferrero, Reckitt Benckiser,
Mm,
RB. Yeah, so we have a wide variety of brands that we work with, but we also work with palm oil traders, so
right.
companies like Cargill and Fuji Oil. And we also work with palm oil clients independently as well outside the membership. So we also have various companies that we work with that could be Malaysian-based companies as well.
Right. And these are companies that are using palm oil in their products, in their business, and they come to you, they come to Earthworm Foundation because they want to look at the environmental and social issues in their supply chain. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So the focus of my work is mainly on social and human rights, and
Mm.
then we have other members of Earthworm that are looking more at the environment, deforestation issues, as well as smallholder livelihoods.
So, when people think about palm oil, typically they do think about those environmental issues, the deforestation, and we've here in Europe in particular, a lot of NGOs have done a lot of campaigning around palm oil and its environmental footprint. But it was only really recently, the last, I was going to say 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, that social issues have come to the fore as well. So what are the social issues that exist in these palm oil supply chains? What should we be worried about?
Yeah, so some of the key issues in Malaysia at the moment in palm oil supply chains really relate to indicators of forced and bonded labor. There are a lot of labor related challenges. So
Just
just to keep
just
in
tell
mind,
just tell us about, just to say, people might not understand the forced and bonded labour. What does that mean?
so the so when it comes to labor exploitation, let's say, so poor working conditions or poor living conditions, this is really a concern. But when it comes to workers who are perhaps working against their will in an involuntary way, perhaps because of due to debts, for example, being unable to leave the place of work due to isolation. Things like that are indicators of forced and bonded labor. So at the moment in Malaysia, there's a lot of media and NGO campaigning spotlight on the industry and various industries actually relating to this concept of forced and bonded labor. Um, but I think this is, of course, a very serious and an extreme case scenario. What we see more often is individual practices, let's say negative retention practices, that companies have been doing for a really long time. So it's been years and years of very similar practices, which now the industry is starting to understand can be linked to forced and bonded labor. So, for example, practices like passport retention. So, for many years, companies have been retaining workers' passports basically to facilitate administrative processes, to make sure workers don't abscond or leave the workplace before their contracts have ended. So all these practices are basically they're not positively enforcing or positively encouraging workers to stay on in the company. So it's more like reactive measures to make sure that in the context of labour shortage, that workers are not leaving prematurely.
Right. And then a lot of these workers are migrant workers, aren't they? I mean, it's something like, am I right in saying it's more than 70% of the workers in the palm oil industry in Malaysia are from outside Malaysia, right?
Yes, that's right. So we have over 70% of plantation workers being from various countries like Indonesia, Bangladesh, India, the Philippines, and Myanmar.
Mm. And they come in generally through recruitment agencies, and they are not so famous necessarily always for their great practices either, right? And they bring the people in, they control their contracts, don't they? Often the contracts are not in the language that the people can understand, the workers can understand, and they are put into these plantation situations, have their passports taken away. And when you come to this question of forced and bonded labour, as I understand it, and yeah, please fill in, Natasha, is that they get charged a rent for their accommodation and for their food and things like this, and then every month they sort of have to pay that off, or they have to pay off a fee that they paid to the recruitment agencies. Is this how the forced and bonded labour situation arises, where they're actually having to pay off these debts just to get the job?
Yeah, so this is the really big challenge when it comes to migrant workers, not only in the palm oil industry, but in any country that has these low skilled labor migration processes. So, in the countries of origin of these workers, they pay a lot to agents or sub agents along the journey from their village all the way to the capital city where the airport is. So, along this journey, they accumulate debts to different people who facilitate the process. And then once they arrive in Malaysia or other countries of destination, they need to repay these debts. And often they may mortgage properties or sell lands or things like that. And they're basically, they need to pay these loans off. And what we found is that for Indonesian workers, for example, the amount that they need to pay is about 2.5 months of their basic wages, whereas it can go all the way up to 2 years worth of basic wages when it comes to, for example, the Bangladeshi workers, or in between those two for the Nepali workers and the Indian workers. So this is really a huge challenge when it comes to migrant workers in Malaysia and other countries of destination as well. So it's not something that is only in the palm oil industry, for example, but it's an overall challenge for international recruitment. And then what we find in Malaysia is that the smaller companies also use agents on the Malaysian side to help them engage agents on the recruitment side in the countries of origin. So then you have another level of fees and debt that then workers start paying back on a monthly basis. In the industry, some companies are providing accommodations completely for free, and others do charge smaller amounts. So when it comes to worker indebtedness, often it's related to recruitment fees. This will be the largest debt that the workers incur, and where a lot of the challenges spring from. And you rightly mentioned the contracts as well. Unfortunately, the way that recruitment is organized is that you find in countries of origin workers are signing these standard contracts from their government. But then, of course, the company in Malaysia will also have their own company contract that they would want the workers to sign. And in some very, very unfortunate but more rare kinds of cases, you find workers that expect to be working in a certain industry that then come to Malaysia and find they're working in a completely different industry. So the contract doesn't match up at all. But for most workers, the more common challenge with contracts is basically not understanding the contents of it, or really key details being left out, and the contracts not being in the language that they understand.
So it's a pretty complex problem, and you've got language issues, you've got cultural issues, you've got people away from their families. You've got a situation where the companies there in Malaysia have a labour shortage, which is why they're bringing these workers in the first place. And I guess they're concerned that having brought these people in, I guess they're paying money to the recruitment agencies too, that if the workers get an opportunity to go down the road and earn a few extra ringgit or a few extra dollars a day or a month, then that'll be attractive to them because it helps them pay off their loans quicker and helps them generate income that they can send home for their families. So hence we get to this place of, as you mentioned, passport retention and other practices that are designed to keep the workers on site, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when I first started working on supplier engagement, basically in the palm oil industry back in 2016, this was a very, very common practice of passport retention. It was the kind of practice that didn't, you wouldn't even blink your eye because it was so widespread and common. But it's just really incredible that now, 4 years on, we can see that passport retention is becoming less and less prevalent, and that companies have either already started returning passports or have completed that already. So we are seeing progress in this issue, and I think that's a very encouraging sign that we can see change in other issues as well facing the industry.
Yeah, now this is really interesting, and this is what I was excited to talk to you about, because I know that you and the team at TFT and now Earthworm Foundation have done a lot of work on this, and you've all been really quite pioneering in your efforts to break through these really complex issues around workers and passport retention and their rights, their human rights basically, and breaking through this bonded and slave labour, I should say forced labour issue. So tell us a bit about that journey, Natasha. I know you've been at the forefront of it with the team there. I'm just fascinated by this change that you just described that's well underway now, where passports are being given back to workers. Whereas 4 or 5 years ago, as you say, when you joined TFT, that wasn't the case. It was the opposite was the norm. The opposite was hold on to the passports. That was the norm in the industry. How did we get to this place? And tell us the journey that you've been on, and the Earthworm team have been on to cross this bridge and to help companies now start acting in a way that really brings respect to the human rights and the dignity of these workers.
Yeah, sure. So I think to start, I think the approach of TFT or Earthworm has always been very solutions orientated. So it never has been about just pointing out what issues are there in the industry, um, but rather looking at the root causes and then trying to come up with some solutions. And I think with the passport issue, we were really lucky that we could start to think creatively about what could the practical solutions be for the employers' challenges. So for the reasons why they were holding on to the passport. So some common fears that employers expressed to us were, okay, maybe the workers would damage their passports or lose them if they were in charge of taking care of them. Or they would say, well, we would need the passports back when we need to renew the visas or renew the passport. So how would we handle that administratively? Then there were others that expressed concern, okay, are we going to be the first ones to return the passports? If we do that, will all the workers run away and go to other sites? And back in 2016, 2017, we started a deep dive with one particular company who, through this deep dive on various labour issues, we brought up the passport issue. And this was a very interesting company because they had really good practices in certain areas with their workers. And while we were doing this deep dive assessment process with their mill and their plantations, we actually invited them in parallel to share about their other good practices with a small group of millers and planters called the Pioneers Forum. And while they were there, they got to hear about other companies' good practices, and some of which included very small companies that had decided to return passports, or basically for the past 10 years hadn't had any passport retention on site. And so they got to hear that, okay, there are a few companies that have done this. And then they felt empowered that they could also do it themselves. So they asked us initially, could we just start with a pilot? We don't want to return all the passports.
Just one or two.
Yeah, I think it was 10% of the workforce they wanted to return the longer term workers. So basically, I came in to the program when we were going back for a second field visit, and we were supposed to verify whether the pilot had taken place and what the results were. But in the meantime, they had this Pioneers Forum, and I think that had really inspired the general manager. So by the time we arrived, they said they had bought safety lockers for all the workers, and that they were planning on returning the passports to everyone.
Wow. How many people we're talking about, Natasha?
Just under 80 workers in the mill.
Yep.
So it's a small, medium-sized company. And it was just great to hear that, because to understand the context, I mean, there weren't many companies that had returned passports. There were so many, even larger companies at that time, that had still not returned passports to workers. So large companies with sustainability certifications and things like that, at that point in time, were holding on to passports with consent letters.
Right.
So it was really something new in the industry. So it was just really amazing that this smaller size company that didn't have any sustainability certification at that time was willing to take that step forward. And I think it just shows the importance of persistence in engagement and that contact time, between whoever is working with these suppliers on the ground, that it's not just this once-off quick audit where you just highlight, all the things that are wrong, but really working closely hand in hand with the site to really understand the needs. And one of their needs was they were wondering how they were going to handle the administrative process. So basically, our team came up with a series of documents to just help them list out, okay, now once they return these passports, what are the workers' responsibilities? What are the company's responsibilities? On what date should the workers return their passport to get the visa renewed? Simple things like this. It was about working closely with the HR and other people on site to come up with documents that are helpful and useful for them to just kickstart that process, to organize that process of returning passports. And what was really nice is that they invited us to come for the passport return event. And I say event because they actually timed it to match their annual family day event. So the local workers and migrant workers were all together having a raffle and doing all kinds of other things, fun things. And what they did is, because everyone was going to be there at that same time, they decided to return all the passports. And we got to make a really nice video about that day. And that video is on YouTube. It's called Passports in Their Palms.
We'll share that. We'll share that so people can see it. It's a beautiful video, yeah. It was a huge ceremony, wasn't it?
Yeah, because everyone was already there waiting for their raffle draw. And it's like that. You see a really big crowd. You see the workers just relaxed and, feeling good. And we got to talk to some of the workers afterwards about, how they felt when they got their passport back. And they all said they felt trusted. And they were really happy that, they had their own individual locker where they could keep their passport in there safely, because the workers also expressed concern sometimes that they feel like it would be safer with the company. So in this case, because they have a locker, they're able to take care of their own passport, know it's in a secure location and not worry about it.
Right. Because if they lose their passport, they're potentially in all sorts of trouble, right?
Yeah, and it's a big admin process to get a new passport, new visa, and all of that kind of thing, and costly as well. So it's definitely something no one would want to happen.
Yeah. So let's just go back. Natasha, you mentioned about this deep dive process. You mentioned about the repeated visits as opposed to these just once off, let's come and do an audit. This sense that you were going in looking for solutions and as opposed to looking for problems. And going in really in an open way with the company. And I would say, and I know the way you work, and I know the way the Earthworm people work is to go in with respect of the company, instead of going and saying, "Oh, geez, you're a bad company because you've held onto these people's passports." It's going in there and recognizing, as you've said, the actual good things that they're doing. They are doing good things and trying to inspire them, or at least. And I was fascinated by your Pioneers Forum, because in that case, rather than you from the Earthworm team having to inspire them, you set up a framework that they could be inspired by their peers, other companies in the sector who had taken, maybe a smaller company, but had taken steps in this direction, gave them that inspiration to say, we could do this too. And going from this 10% to suddenly know, you know what, let's do the whole thing. Let's invest in this. Let's buy lockers. Let's work with Earthworm teams to set up an administrative process. And it sounds to me like the essential ingredients here were openness on your part and on obviously the company's part, and trust and respect that was able to be built over time. Do you see that? Just want to talk about that, Natasha, that these key ingredients, because people see obviously the end result. The end result is that the workers have the passports in their lockers and they feel good. There's other improvements underway, but the process to get there is, it doesn't sound like it was too grueling in this case, but I know in other cases of change that this change process can be really gruesome and grueling and tough work. I know it wasn't easy in this case at all, because there was a lot of fear and concern. But it seems to me you all brought those essential ingredients of openness, of giving the process time, not saying, right, we've got to do this tomorrow, letting trust and respect grow. And that led to this opportunity for connection with you, between your team and the company, and for those really rich conversations to come that allowed them to come openly to the Pioneers Forum and hear their other peers speak. Am I characterising that right? I mean, would you like to add anything on how you think that process unfolded? Because I'm really interested in, obviously the end result's great, but like, how did we get there?
Yeah. Okay. So I think all the engagements that we do are really a two-way learning process. We don't go in saying, okay, we have the exact solution that your company needs right now. Here it is. But it's really listening to the concerns, listening to the fears. Sometimes it means getting yelled at by suppliers.
Yeah, now let's just pause there for a moment, because I've experienced that too in this work. Just tell us about that. Like, when they yell at you, what's that like, and why are they yelling? What do you think's going on there?
I think that there's so much frustration from companies, for especially small, medium-sized companies that may understand a lot less the international market expectations or international consumer expectations. There's frustration because people would feel like, oh, we're following the local laws.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're following the local laws, isn't that good enough?
Right.
And why are you coming here to tell us that, oh no, there's this international standard that we've never heard of? How does that relate to us? So it's all about raising awareness, I would say, that there are these expectations, and that to play in the global marketplace, that you need to step up to meet them, and that just because something worked for the last 20 years doesn't mean that it can go on like that anymore. That there's a shift or a change in market expectations, and that local suppliers need to meet those now. And it's not an easy conversation to have. The easier supplier conversations are when it's a matter of national legislation, yes, no, then that's very clear cut. But when there's no legal obligation, that's very tough. And when they can see around them that other companies haven't made that first move yet, trying to convince companies to take a leadership role, especially small, medium-sized companies, to take a leadership role and step out and do something, it seems risky and scary, and it can also come across as unfair, because often when we're talking about supplier engagement, certain suppliers will be selected first. There isn't mass supplier engagement in the sense that every single supplier gets assessed or supported with programs like ours. Only some will. So that is really a challenge.
Yeah, you're looking for that needle in the haystack of that company leader who you think could, they're already doing some good things. Can you get them over that last bridge or the next bridge? Because there's always another bridge of change, right? But get them over that next threshold to try something new. And as you say, if they're doing something that no one else is doing, it's pretty scary and risky, right? And they're worried that all their workers will run off down the road, and they'll be sitting there and won't be able to run their business. So I can understand their fear and their frustration. But in your instance, in your case, and the Earthworm team, you guys go in there, and you're dealing with these human beings who are fearful about what you're saying, and do scream. I've been roundly screamed at in the past. How do you cope with that? Like, what's your mechanism for dealing with that? Because being screamed at in any situation is not pleasant, right? And you're sitting there, and company leader is screaming at you, or someone's screaming at you. How do you feel, and how do you move through that?
Look, to be very honest, the first time that happened to me, I ended up crying in the bathroom.
That's probably a good reaction. That you've got to let that out too, right?
So, but since then, I realized that no one is screaming at me. They are screaming because of their own frustration, and it's not about me at all. And that it's okay to allow people the space to just let their frustration out.
Right.
Because once the frustration comes out, then you can start having a productive discussion and start moving forward. And I think also one thing that I've learned over the various supplier engagements that we've done is just because you get a no the first time doesn't mean that no will stay. So maybe you just focus on what they agree to move forward on. You work on that. The trust is built, then they'll move forward on the next things.
Yeah. So persistence, right? Persistence is really important.
Really, I think that persistence in engagement, contact time to build trust, these are really keys in moving forward difficult issues in supplier engagement.
In human relations, really, right?
Yes. Yes, you need to trust the people that are advising you to do something differently. You really have to believe that there will be something better at the end of it, and you have to see that what you stand for matches with what they're saying. For you to go forward. So it's not easy. It's not easy, but I'm really happy and pleased with really great progress that we've seen with so many companies over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it really comes down to this alignment and them feeling that there's an alignment of values, right? I mean, they're running a business, they want to make money. We all get that, no problem. But my experience is when the fears come, it's often that, the business will have trouble in a cost situation. It'll cost them more. They'll become uncompetitive. The customers will go away. In this case, maybe their workers will leave and their business will be somehow broken. And yet what you're going in there talking to them about is really about a set of values. It's like, hey, it's really not cool to have workers in this situation. Like, imagine if it was your daughter or your son who was working in a situation like this. I mean, I don't know if I'm guessing you don't use those sort of comparisons, but in some ways that you're inviting them to look at these workers not as just a part of their business, but as human beings, and you're getting a connection with these leaders beyond their sort of worries about profit and loss, quarterly results, KPIs, annual bonuses, whatever, and you're getting them down into a different place and a deeper place. And you mentioned the word deep dive. You get into this place of values and respect for other people, for the environment. And it seems to me that when we get connected to that place, then all of these other things become possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's also so important that there's collaboration. So it can't just be, one buyer that's pushing for industry change, or one NGO, or it really has to be in a collaborative spirit. Even this, the example that we gave you of this, of the mill that returned the passports, they were involved in multiple engagements that were funded by various brands and supported by various palm oil traders as well. So if that level of collaboration wasn't there on different initiatives, the Pioneers Forum was funded by a brand, and then the deep dive support for transformation initiative that actually helped with all the developing those resources and tools was funded by a different brand, and the doors were opened by a refinery, a trader that owns a refinery in that area. So there's just so many companies that were involved in this one really great success story. And then what we were able to do with that video and disseminating that video was just incredible, because so many millers and planters saw that video, were inspired, and actually called the miller in this video to ask for advice and ask what happened after the passports were returned. And the really nice thing, I think, for us as a team, when we look at the way a lot of passports had been returned in various companies is that other companies also did it in a event type manner.
Right.
So we knew they'd been inspired by that video.
Right. They didn't just hand them back. They actually went and had an event and a ceremony and all that sort of stuff too, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, just to make something out of it, to just show their workers, we respect you, and this is why we're returning your passports. We trust you that you will take care of your passports, that you're not going to just up and leave. Um, yeah, it's all about trust and collaboration.
Mm.
So,
It's a beautiful story. I love it. It's a sensational story, and we will share that video. But let's talk about it. You started with 80 workers, right? And all of the, as you say, now these other companies saw the video. They've come on board to do things too. Where is it at now? I mean, last I heard a year or so ago that it was up to about 10,000 workers had received their passports back. I'm sure it's more now, and it's gone beyond the palm oil sector, right? It's gone throughout a lot of other sectors in Malaysia. Just tell us about that, Natasha.
yeah, so actually, when we started doing this work, there was basically the law in Malaysia allowed for not passport retention, but basically there was no strict restriction for employers to hold passports. So basically, it's unlawful passport retention that's not allowed by law. So basically, there were a lot of companies that had these consent forms that they would make workers sign without giving them any other option.
Right. Option one. Option one, tick the box. Option two, see option one.
Yes, exactly. So this is what was there in the industry, and because there wasn't really any way to enforce this, because passports comes under immigration matters, whereas labor inspectors say that do labor inspection, they follow the labor law, and there's no mention of passport holding in labor law. So there were a few things that happened also in the legal space that helped us, and that is the growing awareness of human trafficking. So passport retention is also, it's linked to forced labor, but it's also linked to anti-trafficking efforts too. So in that case, then there was growing awareness that passport retention is a problem, whether there's a consent letter or not. Then we started to see the changes in certification standards as well, to include passport retention without that consent letter option. So that was helpful. And but most helpful was the government here coming up with an employer's undertaking. And it was basically just a list of some key labor issues, including passport retention, that the employer at the highest level of the company, basically director level, had to sign off to say that they would abide by all these things when they make the request for a migrant worker quota to get in workers from overseas. So that basically gave us the legs to stand on. So it wasn't just inspiring people to change. Now we also had the legal and policy framework of the country to help, and then later the certification standards as well. So, which is really important, I think, because I think inspiring companies to change is, it's really hard. It's really hard when you just don't have that legal and policy framework to support you. And it's just incredible that as, the palm oil industry started returning passports, various other industries also started doing the same thing. Various certification standards started realizing, hey, this is actually a really big issue that everyone's been, overlooking in audits. And we've really seen change. And now, companies that we meet, they're already ready to return passports, and they just want some guidance They just want tools. They want to know how to organize it. It's no longer a matter of, you bring up passport retention and everyone starts shouting. So it's really incredible.
Yeah, look, congratulations, Natasha, to you and the team and the people there at Earthworm, and it started a few years ago. So you've led a long journey, and it's really interesting. And one of the people used to say, what's your process for change? What's your change model? I think there's a term for that. Anyway, I always used to think that governments, and I've seen this in many contexts where governments are looking at these things often, but they're not really sure whether they can go forward or not. And then some little pioneering project happens, that needle in the haystack, and where inspiration is a critical part of it. And folks like yourself and the team get out there and they work with someone in the industry to inspire them to do it. And then guess what? Nothing terrible happens. There's not riots on the streets. Companies aren't going bust. Actually, it enhances the brand of that company, and then it starts to enhance the brand of the industry. So this problem of the industry of the passports just goes away, and people start saying, well, okay, so that box has been ticked. What else can we look at? And it gives governments their own inspiration to say, well, you know what, we actually could change the law on that. Now, obviously, let's not take all the credit for the legal changes, but congratulations to the Malaysian government. Okay, but often some of these things are present, maybe they're talking about it, and then they see an example, and then boom, away you go. And so this change at a greater level, and I agree with you, I think, if we had to inspire company by company, it'd be a very long journey. But if we can inspire one or two, and the government, and we saw this in Indonesia, for example, with the palm oil industry there, and then Asia Pulp and Paper, when they signed on to a no deforestation commitment, there weren't riots in the street. Actually, it enhanced their brand and it helped them generate more business. And so the government, who's concerned for social order, for making sure that people are being employed and employed under the right conditions, it gives them greater confidence to say, oh, okay, well, let's make a law about this and make it a level playing field. Let's make sure everyone does it. So I so think that I would say that your experience in the toilet crying has been an important part of the overall journey. And I mean that because it's all part of it, right? It's, we get screamed at and it's tough. Particularly, the first time it happens, you come out of the meeting, you think, God, that was awful. But you hang in there and you build that trust. You build respect amongst the players and you inspire them to look for solutions because you're still there, even though they screamed at you. And step by step, they start saying, Natasha, what do you think we should do here? What do you think we should do there? And then, obviously the other earthworm people can come and say, well, I know about that. I saw this over here. Well, why don't you try that? And you start having a discussion around, I call it the art of the possible, as opposed to these are all the things that are wrong with you and you're a dodgy fella and we don't really want to talk to you. And you push people back into their corners. Yeah. When you have this discussion around the art of the possible, like what can we do here? And how does that feel? Well, I feel pretty good giving my workers their passports back. And then you say, okay, well, let's have a look at their contracts. And I know you've done a lot of work there as well. And then away you go. And it then becomes, well, what can we do next? And then the government makes legal changes. And as you say, you start building and building. And well, isn't it great that the certification schemes come along too? And, as people know, I'm not a great fan of some of the certification schemes work, but it's great that they saw this change and they changed their standards. But, what a shame that operations were in fact sustainably certified that had these practices. You could have forced and bonded labour and be certified as sustainable. That's another discussion. Let's leave it. But isn't it great to see the certification schemes changing their standards too? So it becomes this cascade of change, right, where everything becomes mutually reinforcing.
Yes, exactly. And I think it just gives us confidence to know that we can just continue to tackle tough issues and that there is hope for change. Because it can get so discouraging when you're in the thick of it and it seems like, okay, these issues are too widespread. They're too much of a norm. And then you just, you get that breakthrough and then it feels like, hey, we did that once. I think we can do it again.
Fantastic. Well, look, Natasha, that's that's really inspiring, and super big congratulations to you for your work there, and everyone else at Earthworm Foundation for the work that they've done in that particular case, but obviously for all the work they're doing to try and bring change on a broader scale of issues. So big congratulations, and full strength to you as you go forward and go out into the world. I guess not so much going out these days. There's a lot more Zoom conferences and things like that. But interacting with people and building trust and going in with the courage, and I do believe it's courage, with the courage to be open and to be open to the other, and to listen to what they say and try and connect to them as human beings, as opposed to going in there telling them how it should be. And I think that is the essential gift that you and everyone else who brings change in the world really manifests in the way you are in the world. So it gives me great inspiration, and that's essentially why I really wanted to talk to you and get that story that you've been involved in, as you say, involved with other people. Let's give them all the credit that they've done too. But it's deeply inspiring. So thank you so much, Natasha.
Well, thank you very much, Scott, for those kind words. And yeah, it's really been a pleasure to share this story about the team's work on this area with you and with everyone listening. So thank you so much.
Good on you.